Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Rent Free Podcast. This is BJ Bethel, and also known as BJ Interviews Anyone. And today, our guest is not just anyone. She is Christine Brennan. She's a sports columnist for USA Today and was a longtime columnist with Washington Post. And part of their was some of the greatest sports writers of all time they had there on their staff when she was a part of that. And also worked down in Miami for a long time. And of course, everybody knows her now for her book on her game. It's a story about Caitlin Clark and her senior year at Iowa all the way through her first year in the WNBA. And to say the book and Caitlin have been mired in controversy would be quite the understatement. And but it's an exciting read. I think everybody should go out and take a good look at this thing. And as a fellow sports writer, Christine, I just got to ask you something right off the bat. How did you manage to turn this around so fast and do it in the narrative that you were able to do? You are telling like three or four different tremendous stories here at the same time in this book, and you did it on such a short turnaround. How were you able to accomplish this? I know as a fellow writer, I just this was so fascinating to me and was so impressive.
Oh, well, thanks, BJ. Well, great to be talking to you. Great to be on with a fellow Ohioan.
Yes.
I-75. Anyone who, there are millions of people who know Ohio or grew up in Ohio knows the I-75 corridor. You're closer to Dayton, and I grew up near Toledo. So, a fellow Western Ohioan. But yeah, this was just magical. Just popped it out of the blue. Although there were some days in January and February that were not so magical as I was working 12, 14-hour days in the darkness and cold and, wondering how I was going to get this thing done. But the briefest story possible, I met Caitlin Clark because the Olympic swimming trials were in Indianapolis. If the Olympic swimming trials before the Paris Olympics were not in Indianapolis, I would not have met Caitlin Clark. I did ask a question or two when she came to Washington, which is where I'm based, but we didn't actually shake hands or talk. So, and I'm in Indy. I'm covering the swimming, Katie Ledecky, whatever. But my editors asked me to go over and do a few columns on the fever because they were in town a few of those days, and when I was at the trials. And so, thank goodness they were. I was there. And then I did meet her through the general manager, Lynn Dunn, who I had covered as I started my career at the Miami Herald. She was at that point, Lynn Dunn, the woman who drafted Caitlin Clark, was just starting out as a new head coach of the University of Miami Hurricanes women's basketball team. So, life is funny how you connect with people and then years later you connect again. And so met Caitlin and talked to her, and I got home from DC, back to DC, BJ, and I had a week or two before I went to the Olympics. And again, this is not hard. This is dream life. I'm so lucky, so fortunate. I've worked hard for it, but you still got to be so lucky to be able to cover Olympics and Super Bowls and all this stuff that I've been so fortunate to do. Anyway, and I was just started thinking, like, do I want to do a book on Caitlin Clark? Who's doing a book on her? Someone should do a book. It should be me. It could be me. Do I want to write a book? No, I'm happy with not writing books right now. They do they overtake your life. They really do. And I was having fun with all the things in my life that did not involve a book project. I've written now 8 books, but it had been 19 years since I'd written a book. My father-daughter memoir, Best Seat in the House. And again, I wasn't even, and it kind of kept nagging me, like end of June into early July last year, 2024. I had a conversation with a Scribner editor. Scribner is my publisher, but again, I hadn't talked to any of these people in so long. And one thing led to another, and I had an offer. Like we had no book proposal, no plan, no nothing. And Rick Horgan, the book editor, who I'd blurbed another book of his, so we had a little bit of a connection, just called me and said, "We want you to do this. Here's the offer." It was a wonderful offer, advance, to do it. And I couldn't say no, really. And so I didn't say no. I said yes. And then I tossed and turned that night. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? So came back from Paris and then immediately flew into this. I went right to Indianapolis and wherever the Fever were the rest of the season. It's an unauthorized book, which sounds ominous. It sounds ominous, but it's not. It's what you want, what readers want. It's a journalistic look at not only one of the most famous athletes in the country, but one of the most famous people in the country and one of the most beloved. and no matter injured or not, she still is. And so, I asked her 40 to 50 questions. She answered every one. What a straight shooter, looks you in the eye, as I say in the book, 22 going on 40 or 50. The maturity level I have not seen, I've seen probably in 4 or 5 athletes total in my 44-year career. I
Wow.
mean, just amazing, incredible poise, handling tough questions. I asked her tough questions. She answered them about her behavior on the court, technical fouls. What are you thinking? Oh, too much, too much. And we went back and forth. That's all in the book. That's all in on her game. All those back and forth with her that I had the opportunity. She knew she was answering questions for the book. Anyway, so did that. And then came back and had like 4 months to write it. And that is insane. I mean, and
That's
probably,
that's
you know,
that's that's more than insane.
it,
That's
it,
unbelievable.
well, it's yeah, it's unbelievably insane. Maybe we'll put the two words together. And like there were moments, even with all this, but you've been done this a while. I've done this a long time. There were moments I'm going, can I pull this off? Like, is this going to happen? Am I going to be able to do this? You do doubt, and I tell kids that a lot, young women especially, and young men. It's okay to doubt. Like that fired me. I would try to get a decent night's sleep. I usually did, and then I'd work 12, 14-hour days. And there, people have asked like, oh, well, do you like write in the morning and then take the afternoon off? Are you kidding? There was no time for that. This was just plow ahead, right, like crazy. Deadlines or I had outlines, but then I changed the outline, putting in a new chapter last minute. So my journalistic background, which of course is write quickly, cover breaking news, Olympics, Super Bowls, Tiger Woods, whatever. So that really helped me here because I was just firing on all cylinders. But 4 months, I mean, a quick book for your listeners, a fast book would be a year,
Yes.
and this was 4 months. And but then I had a couple months to retool things, and I was making changes till the end of April. I pulled an all-nighter to fact check everything. I should not be. No one should pull all-nighters, especially someone who has been around a few years. But I did it. A lot of like electrolytes, a lot of eating healthy, lots of water. I really made sure I could stay in decent shape, and went to my personal trainer every now and then because that was important. This whole thing was really just an endurance exercise on fast forward, but it worked, and I got it done, and then the reaction has been unbelievable. I knew it could be. I knew that this could really sell. But to debut at #2 on the New York Times bestseller list was beyond my wildest dreams. My books have been national bestsellers, but not New York Times bestseller. So that was cool, cherry on top at this point in my career. And I smile now because I hold the book in my hands and I go, how did that even happen in a year? July 10th was the first phone call last year. July 11th, I had the offer, 2024, July 11th. July 16th of 2025, we're #2 on the New York Times bestseller list. So less than 53 weeks. But what a magical story. Just makes me smile. And what a delight. And also just what a terrific human. For those who are fans of Caitlin Clark, she's better than you hope for. The maturity, the kindness, the smiles, the long answers. Tiger Woods covered Tiger the length of his career, BJ, and young Tiger, just Caitlin's age basically, and all the way through. And he'd just get mad and huff and puff and get bored with questions and want to leave. Caitlin Clark is the complete opposite, 180 of Tiger Woods. Tiger never wanted to sign autographs. That's fine. He's a great golfer. That's okay. It's a free country. He can do whatever he wants. Caitlin, all those autographs, think of the coattails of Caitlin Clark 20, 30, 40 years from now in this country versus Tiger. We expected so many more young men and women of color to play golf. They're not there. They're not there because Tiger never cared. Caitlin cares. So I know I veered off there, but I think it's important to
Yeah.
explain the magnitude of this woman, this incredible poise and maturity, and her appreciation for her moment, and how big a deal it is, and what is required of her, and how she accepts that responsibility. It's truly fascinating, and I loved chronicling it.
One thing you stated in the book, and the book's fantastic. You weave together this. It's like you were the perfect writer for this story because you know the history of Title IX. You grew up in Ottawa Hills outside of Toledo. You know that in the Midwest, everybody talks about great high school sports states. and where there's big followings and things like that. But 90% of the time they're talking about football. I mean, you
Right.
get into like Western Ohio and Indiana, those small towns, they follow all their high school sports like it's the Super Bowl. It's a different mentality, and you kind of weave this narrative of just like the history of the 6-on-6 basketball in Iowa, the history of Title IX, and how Iowa's women's athletic department really made sure their athletes knew the history of that. The history of that. So it was really impressive to read that alongside Caitlin's story. And like in one, I think one of the things you said in the book, it really shocked me was she said, I know at one point you said she was doing 6 hours of media a day, and on top of trying to, get into becoming a professional basketball player after her senior year at Iowa. It's really remarkable just how much she was doing, and especially in the face of everything that was going on around her in the league and, with social media. Um,
Mhm.
there's not, I'm trying to think of what I did at 22 years old. I know I couldn't have handled all that. But
Yeah.
she's been injured for a bit now. What have you been following what's been going on with her? She had played a handful of games to start the year. She started the season injured. She ended up having a groin injury. She's still kind of out. But they're setting these attendance records basically because all these tickets were sold out preseason when before she got injured.
Right.
The Fever still had a pretty good year. Have you kept up with them? Have you kept in touch? Just what's things going on there? How's her mindset? And do you
Yeah.
think it's really hurt the league going into the playoffs?
Well, there's no doubt it's hurt the league. They won't say it because they're so afraid of hurting the feelings of the other older players, which is just mind-boggling that we're still there with the WNBA well into year two of the Caitlin Clark era, but we are. And I deal with all of that in the book, and obviously it's happening year two as well. Just that Kathy Engelbert's inability to say Caitlin Clark's name, the 27 minutes in her State of the League back in October last year. The commissioner cannot say the name Caitlin Clark for 27 minutes, talking all about moving to bigger arenas. One reason for that, Caitlin Clark. All about the incredible attendance records. Reason for that, Caitlin Clark. The incredible TV viewership record breaking, again, Caitlin Clark, and the commissioner cannot say her name. It's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen and covered, and it's got to stop. It's the league will need to figure this out. Leadership needs to help the players understand, which is, it's a 74% black league. Here comes a white superstar. I've covered the league. It's the length of it. I was at the Atlanta Olympics in '96, which was the launching pad for the WNBA in 1997. I've cared very much. I wish it had succeeded. I wish that it wasn't Caitlin Clark. I wish it had been Cheryl Swoops. I wish it had been
Yeah,
Maya Moore, Caitlin Clark's favorite player, Candace Parker. I wish they had been household names where Grandma and Grandpa in the produce section were talking about racing home to make sure they caught Candace Parker's game on TV. And I'm not talking about Grandma and Grandpa in Chicago or in Tennessee or wherever. I'm talking about in Spokane, Washington, and Biloxi, Mississippi, because Caitlin is a nationwide, in some ways, worldwide phenomenon. And the facts and the numbers are there, totally. But funny thing about facts, VJ, facts are facts,
yeah,
and data is data. And yet everyone seems to want to deny all this. But it didn't happen then, and it's happening now. And I deal with all that in the book. Why? And have the great voice of Dr. Harry Edwards talking about, civil rights leader, black man, good friend of mine, about what should have been done to help the players, not because they're damsels in distress, but because this was unlike anything that has ever happened to any sports league, male, female, in the country ever. A league that got no attention, that was now going to be elevated into major league status overnight because of one person.
yeah,
And that's where we are. And they couldn't handle it. And the NBA didn't help or didn't want to help. I've never seen anything like that in my life. Charter flights, they didn't have those ready. I asked a question, then 3 days later, I'm breaking the news they have charter flights. I mean, what the heck is that? The Olympic snub, ridiculous, looks worse every day. Not putting Caitlin Clark on the Olympic team because of her stats and also because of her appeal. And all those players getting the attention that because the spotlight on Caitlin Clark also now shines on them. So when she's out, Yes, they've got higher attendance this year than they had last year. I think people fail to mention, and journalists, come on. You're a journalist covering the league. You need to tell your readers the whole story. I'm stunned at what I see from colleagues and younger journalists and younger reporters and broadcasters, and maybe they're not journalists, maybe they're, sideline reporters working for the team. And I'm not saying that's not good, that's fine, but that's not journalism as we define it. That's not independent. If your paychecks from the other, a team, and that's NFL, that's all sports. I mean, that happen NBA, whatever. But you've got to say there's there's a new team in the league, the Valkyries, and they're breaking attendance records left and right. So if you add a new team, your attendance should go up, especially when that team is killing it and basically selling out all its own games. But the Indiana Fever still have the highest average attendance. And you're right. People go, oh, well, that means that they don't care about Caitlin. No, the analysis here is just appalling to me. How amateur hour it is, BJ. Just incredible, absolute like rookie stuff. The reason that Indiana Fever are still getting like 16,000 they had the other night, and I know this because I had two family members who bought tickets a month ago, close to the court, because they thought for sure Caitlin Clark would be back then.
Yeah.
I was not involved in this. This is, two members of my family. Well, they still went. They bought those tickets, obviously thinking Caitlin Clark would be back for that Minnesota game on Friday night, a few days, as we're speaking now, a few days ago. Well, she wasn't, but they still went. So that's Caitlin Clark. It's all Caitlin Clark. And until people realize that, and here's one, you may not get this in your, as you wander around, in your neighborhood, but I still get it and I see it. And I think someone just recently on X just posted something about Paige Beckers, and I may need to reply with a few facts. Paige Beckers is a great player. She is a great player. She was Caitlin Clark before Caitlin Clark, and then unfortunately she got injured. And I deal with all that in the book. They grew up 3.5 hours, 3:45, but drive apart. Suburbs of Minneapolis, suburbs of Des Moines. I mean, with great respect for one another. Paige knows Caitlin Clark is it. She's the one. Paige has said it. She knows it's Caitlin. The the attention magnet. But people say, oh well, Paige Beckers, it's okay. Got Paige Beckers. Paige Beckers, get ready for this one. And I just double checked before we started talking the last 3 games, but I've checked this throughout the season. The Dallas Wings, who are I think in last place now, they're second, whatever, they're terrible. But they play in a 7,000 seat arena at the University of Texas in Arlington, a suburb of Dallas. 7,000 seat arena. Paige Beckers cannot sell that out.
Yeah.
6,100, 6,200. The last 3 games, they didn't get to 6,500. Paige Beckers is not Caitlin Clark.
It's
Paige
not
Beckers,
the star power
not,
is just completely different, or not even in the same universe.
I was going to, not in the same solar system, but you're right. I'll just go to universe. Yeah. I'll quote you on that. No, they're not even close. And yet there's this, I think it's a UConn bias. This is not in the book, but because I have thought about this and I do give my opinion in a lot of ways, on this book tour now for almost 2 months. I think it shocks the UConn faithful that somehow a UConn woman is not the one.
I think this is bringing up an important factor to all this that that you've noticed, and people that like I started out. I covered a lot of high school and college women's basketball. I think I may have covered Kelsey Mitchell when she was at Princeton and Cincinnati. One of my friends covered her and her sister at Ohio State, and so we know our stuff. But it's like this: the girls' basketball, women's basketball, and when you see the UConn Page kind of bias. And I was going to ask you about Gina Arima here in a minute, because he's been highly disappointing to me the last year or so. But it just shows that the sports, and not just women's basketball, but this goes across the board, have just become insanely insular. they're like this in group of coaches and players. They become this small little club, and it's not just women's basketball; it's other sports as well. Among the major sports, men's sports, they've had this marketing machine going on for a while. The WNBA didn't have it, and that's one thing you state in the book that just absolutely blows my mind was how unprepared they were for Clark. But how they thought she was going to come in and have the impact Maya Moore did. Maya was a tremendous player, and of course, she was a star. But I mean, Caitlin Clark in Iowa was getting better ratings in the NCAA championship game than the men's game. That's never happened on anywhere. Um, just how frustrating is it for you just to watch this and just see how this is finally the moment you've been waiting for your whole career as a journalist, as a woman who's really been somebody who's been an innovator and influential in your field, and then just to see the league kind of just kind of really kind of mess this up, it has to be frustrating.
Well, I'm a journalist, obviously, as you know, and
Yeah.
so it's fascinating to cover. Absolutely fascinating. As a human being, it's unfortunate, but on this one, I'm a journalist, and so it doesn't take away the premise. The only, you know, Scribner bought the book. I did not buy the book, right? So
Yes.
Scribner wanted a book on Caitlin Clark. They did not want a book on anyone else, right? Otherwise, there'd be other books, right? So the reason, to me, and Caitlin Clark exists, and she's going to exist for the next 15 years, hopefully, in the WNBA. And as I said earlier, she's going to make her mark for the rest of her life. There's a 5-year-old girl right now who's going to be another superstar in the WNBA. We don't know her name. We don't know where she is. And she'll be gunning it from the parking lot, chucking it from the next county. And then a coach will say, hey, can we keep it to just normal threes for a while? And that's going to be because of Caitlin Clark. And she'll be a great player. And
Yes.
there'll be hopefully hundreds of them. So what I love, and I say this in the book, and as you know, is that I never thought I would see in my lifetime fans lined up for hours, just hours and hours, um, in the cold in January and February in Big Ten, outside of Ohio State's arena, outside of my alma mater Northwestern's arena, outside of the Indiana University Assembly Hall, huge Big Ten arenas, usually filled up for men's basketball, and fans in line for hours in the cold, like it's a Springsteen concert or Taylor Swift or Beyonce, and they're lined up to watch a woman play basketball. To say that sentence never gets old. So that's the joy for me personally, and the success. I mean, victory's achieved. It's today's the greatest day in women's sports until tomorrow. You cannot deny that. And being on this
Yes.
book tour, being in Iowa, and having 350 people in line for 3 or 4 hours after talking with Coach Lisa Bluter and Coach Jensen in Iowa City. That was amazing. And people lined up, as I said, for 3 hours or so for book signing. And so many of them are men who come up and tell me, I mean, many women too, of course, but they never cared about women's basketball. They never watched. Older guys now that take their granddaughters or can't wait to go to their granddaughters' games. So Title IX is the law, signed by Richard Nixon, June of 1972, opening the floodgates for girls and women to play sports, as you know, in this country. As big a law as there's been over the last 53 years in this country. And the magnitude of women running for president in the 30s and 40s, moving forward, running the country, and all those women who are now like 30, but we don't know who they are yet, who will be president in 20 years, be running Fortune 500 companies. Obviously the common denominators, they played sports because of Title IX. And so we've got all that. Well, now you've got these men who care deeply. And so that's the victory. So the fact that you've got pettiness and ridiculousness in the WNBA, that's going to end, if only, I mean, somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
It's probably ending now because they're in the CBA negotiations, collective bargaining agreement, and they need Caitlin Clark desperately. And when Caitlin Clark was gone for those first 5 games, when she disappeared for those first 5 games, more than half the TV audience disappeared. Think about that. More than half the TV audience that is falling off a cliff. That Tiger Woods would miss a tournament and would drop a few percentage points. Michael Jordan goes to play baseball and that drops, some percentage points. Over half the TV audience found something else to do for those 5 games. And it wasn't just the fever, it was the entire league's viewership. That is devastating. So those players who are cheap shotting Caitlin Clark for their livelihoods, they need Caitlin Clark desperately. It is a fascinating conundrum. So you asked about, how I feel personally. I'm so energized by the story. And one of the great things, as you know very well, and you've done this for years, about journalism is we expose things and we show the world what's going on. And the WNBA cannot afford to continue to make these kinds of mistakes and not figure out how to accept Caitlin Clark as the greatest thing that's ever happened. We wish it had happened sooner. Maya Moore, her favorite player. It would have been amazing if Maya Moore had been that person, but Maya Moore couldn't sell out her Minnesota arena. Caitlin Clark, of course, sells out everywhere. So even the thought of Caitlin Clark. So I guess what I'm saying, people, I cannot believe if there was stronger journalism, if you had major journalists put on this beat, I would not be the only one saying this.
Yes.
And I'm not saying, oh, I'm so great. Not at all. I mean, this is just basic journalism. And to show, and again, just the last week, the biggest attendance ever. I didn't see, maybe you did. Maybe there was, but I never saw a mention that, oh, by the way, there's a whole new team adding to that, and that team is selling out in Golden State and San Francisco.
The Athletic story on it mentioned Golden State, the Valkyries, pretty early on. And they mentioned them pretty early on. It mentioned Paige Beckers, but they finally got around to mentioning Clark like in the third to last paragraph. It was
it's like, but I think here's the problem for some of these younger writers, and I've mentored some, and I care about them, and I'd love to help them more, but that's okay. They'll do their thing, and I wish them the best. I want them to succeed. Of course I do. I have scholarships that giving money to young women in sports media and young men in journalism through Northwestern and women through our Association for Women in Sports Media. I started the scholarship internship fund for the Association for Women in Sports Media when I was the first president back in 1989, 1990. And so, I'm all in for this. They'll figure it out, but you're not helping, you're not telling the true story if you don't already say that Caitlin Clark is the one. But what it has done, and it's given me free reign to tell the story, and there probably is no secret why this book debuted at #2 on the New York Times bestseller list. I don't know, but maybe people are craving, journalism telling you what's going on. I don't know. I mean, that I would have to interview everyone who bought the book. I'm not, I'd love to thank them.
I think that's a great point, because I go online and almost everything I see, whether it's pro Caitlin, anti Caitlin, as far as like a straight up social media deal where you go on, I got a Facebook page, and then for some reason, Mark Zuckerberg likes to torture me by having the reels pop up, the short videos, and almost all of them are AI fake quotes, just it's supposed to be trash talk between different players and things like that. And I think one reason, and this is where you've done, you're just, I mean, you would say, and I would say you're just doing your job, but people are really craving facts on what's happening with Clark. And I think a lot of that's because, there just it's not been covered well. I don't know if that's because of the economics in journalism right now or whatever, but I think there's definitely people craving facts and what's really going on with this situation and this story. And a lot of that's because Clark's such a huge star. And I think I would like to ask you about this too. Cheryl Reeve, I can't remember if you managed to fit this into the book or not. I don't think so, but I saw a tweet she made where she was talking about the book, and she said, I guess she bought it. She said that, you always need a villain in your books, and you decided to make her the villain. And I was like, that doesn't really play out well, because you asked her for, I think, quote, numerous times throughout the book. And that was another thing that got to me, was there were so many people who refused to comment who were openly, anti-Clark before she even came into the league. That was something I don't think I've ever really seen in a major sports story like that. Did that surprise you, or what was your reaction to that and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, well, you give everyone a chance to talk, and like Angel Reese, I went back to her people one time. Well, I was talking to them a couple times, and then went back another time to say, really, I'd like to give her a shot to talk. And one of the things I told several agents or PR people, I said, this is going to sound a little weird, but bear with me for a second. I said, I wrote a book called Inside Edge, which is a national bestseller. It was the
Yes.
first journalistic look at figure skating after the Tanya Nancy thing. So it did great, still sells, and still we'll have a new version going into the Winter Olympics in Milan, which are coming up in February. I'll be there covering those, and so we'll have a new version with a new forward and what have you of that book out in a few months. Anyway, that book I still occasionally sign copies, hard copies, hardcover or paperback, in concourses at events, or someone else ask me to sign a book plate, or sign send me the book and want me to sign it. Book came out in 1996. I say that because that means books hang around. Books are around. If my book in 1996, if I still see copies of it floating around that people want me to sign or people want to talk about it, that means now we are going to be 30 years of that book and that people are still talking about it. So I said, I have no idea what the future holds, but on her game, my guess is if Inside Edge is around 30 years later, on her game, because Caitlin Clark will be fascinating throughout her entire life, because she's such a great speaker. She's going to play more golf. You know what I mean? She is.
Yes.
Any people pay to go to their seats still to look at her on the bench. The roar for the crowd when she comes out. It happened the other night. The roar. I think it was Minnesota. People start cheering like crazy when she just comes out in her sweats to sit on the bench. So this book will be around a while. So my point to these various PR people, who I have to say, again, the WNBA has not been well served, sadly, by not having the best of the best. Now, the NBA has some of the best of the best, PR, marketing people. I'm not sure where they are on all this. They seem to have disappeared or something to help the WNBA. Not because the WNBA is women, but because it's still so new. And it's never had anything like this. So this book's going to be around a while. And I gave Cheryl Reeve and Angel Reese and, my goodness, Jen Rosati, who was in charge of that terrible decision of the Olympic snub, just a disastrous, ridiculous decision. Why does the NHL shut down to go to the Olympics? To increase the visibility of all those players, right? You go
Yeah.
to the Olympics as a platform. You want that incredible platform around the world. That's what the WNBA, that's what they could have had, USA Basketball with Caitlin Clark. I gave them all a chance to talk to me over and over again, going back to PR people, going back to whoever, one more email, one more text message, because I wanted to give them the chance, knowing this book's probably going to be around a while. And their silence will be then around a while. And what is the reader left with? Their mistakes, their amateur hour behavior, their quotes that are very edgy. And so Cheryl Reeve was 57 years old. And she was focusing on a 22-year-old woman, BJ, on social media. That alone is creepy, bordering on malfeasance in terms of the power dynamic between a 57-year-old woman and a 22-year-old woman. And let's just throw into the pot the fact that Cheryl Reeve is the Olympic coach, and this is happening in May, and Caitlin Clark is still very much a candidate for Cheryl Reeve's Olympic team.
Well, yeah. I
How
can't. I
on
can't.
earth?
I cannot imagine Oscar Robertson being asked about Larry Bird or
Well,
Michael
Bobby,
Jordan
well,
or
it would have been the equivalent, would have been Bobby Knight in 1984 tweeting at, blaming um, Michael Jordan for not having Indiana on TV more. I mean, but the power dynamic, we are very aware of that in social media now, right?
yes.
Just the way that adults treat especially young women. So Cheryl Reeve, as I understand it, I have screenshots of all that, of what she did. I understand she's deleted it all. So your listeners right now, that's probably all they need to know about what was true and what wasn't. Cheryl Reeve has deleted those tweets. She was blaming Caitlin Clark for not having the Minnesota Lynx game on TV. I mean, what on earth? And that this was okay with the WNBA, this was okay with USA Basketball, this was okay with the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee. No reprimand, no nothing. And I'll even stay on this with my sources even now to find out if they did in fact talk to her about it. But I could not find that out for the book. So then Cheryl Reeve says she's read the book. The book wasn't out yet. When she was speaking, I know when it was because I'd done an interview with Adam Gold in North Carolina, his radio show. And then Adam asked me about it. I didn't bring Cheryl Reeve up. I mean, there's 100 bigger stories on her game than Cheryl Reeve. And I like Cheryl Reeve. I think she's funny and she's cynical, and I get a kick out of her most of the time. But I'm a journalist. I'm not on anyone's payroll. This is basic. This is journalism 101. Again, shocking that no one else reported any of this. And people might go, oh, well, maybe that says because Christine Brennan shouldn't have written that. No, no, it means you should be writing and talking about it, and you failed
Yes.
to do your job. And I'm happy to say that. And if that sounds mean, well, sorry, this is the big time here, folks. And anyway, Cheryl Reeve, yeah, saying it's fiction. Well, it's nonfiction. And again, she then deletes tweets. So Cheryl Reeve, but Cheryl Reeve has how many text messages from me? I looked, I think there were 3 alone in the summer last year, and then for the book, plus I went to her PR people as she told me to get her interview, and she could have softened all of this, right? I'm giving her opportunities to soften and to explain herself. As I said, going back to the thought that this book could be around a while, and there'll be people reading this book. The library, list at Cedar Rapids, Iowa, goes into next year. So they'll be reading about Cheryl Reeve, and they'll be reading about the behavior of Kathy Engelbert and others. And I like
Yeah.
Kathy Engelbert too. But I gave them an opportunity to say, hey, oops, I blew it. I shouldn't have done that. Or whatever they wanted to say. They chose not to. They're adults. I respect them not choosing not to. And it probably made the book better, made the book edgier, right? But to have those quotes without any follow-up to soften it. But I was bending over backwards, which would have then made the book maybe less interesting, but would have made it journalistically. I was giving them every chance journalistically because my goal is journalism, not a edgier book. But because of
Yes.
their wanting to avoid talking to me, fine, 100%. I respect that. It made the book better, and the book sold better because there was more of that in there. Again, I worked against myself to try to give them that opportunity to soften whatever they wanted to say.
I know that I was surprised. One thing your book goes into about, and this is kind of one of the heartbreaking little thing is with Cheryl Reeve specifically in the Minnesota Lynx, was Clark's favorite team growing up was the Lynx. Moore was her favorite player, and of course she was the greatest player in Lynx history. So that, it makes it a little bit more confusing, the acrimony there. But another coach that really kind of surprised me, and I should say disappointed me, but maybe not. We've had some Dayton and Cincinnati are kind of hotbeds for girls basketball. We've had some girls go to UConn and they ended up leaving. But Gino Ariema, early on in the season, he was on the Dan Patrick show. I happened to be watching it, and you put this in the book too. He was talking about Clark and basically was saying that she wasn't prepared for the league. And then he went on to just really slander her fan base. And what the 2 things that really struck me hard here was, this coach was making these judgments on all these new fans. But the other thing was, this is a coach who knows basketball. He's, besides Pat Summitt, is maybe the greatest women's basketball coach in the history of college. But the teams were coming out of the gate playing her 90 feet. You can't deny her you can't deny her, her ability, her ability to draw people as a star. And it seems to be people trying to take it out on her game and her ability to play instead. But it's like, how many rookies come into a league and they got people double teaming them 90 feet in some cases, which is what happened to Clark coming straight in from college. This was just so disingenuous, and was kind of shocked by it. Were you? I mean, when you did you ever have an opportunity to ask any of them about this? When you were talking to players and coaches about, when they would say something negative, she ain't going to be able to play that style here. It's a lot harder league, blah blah blah. But they were playing her like she was Michael Jordan walking in
Right.
right out of college.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so Debbie Antonelli and Tamika Catchings, there's quotes from both of those great, great voices in the book about how they're guarding her and the respect, the incredible respect that, and Christy Sides, the coach last year. She spoke to me. I've got lots of new stuff from Christy Sides, the former coach of the Fever, about the entire season. So people will see the season through her eyes. In totally exclusive. Christy Sides hasn't talked to anyone but me for the book. So that's in there. But yeah, ultimate compliment. The moment Caitlin said on the floor, she's the most important player in the league. And then you have someone like Dawn Staley, who's on the committee. So the people that made the decision to not put her on the Olympic team include Dawn Staley, several other great basketball minds. All the names are in the book. In the Olympic snub chapter that I think there's new stuff in there, new reporting, how Caitlin really react, totally disappointed, wanted to go practice it after midnight when they landed back in Indy. She was that upset. Just, wanted to, no one said she wanted to run through a brick wall, but that's the kind of, image that I had of what I was hearing from Christy Sides, just talking about how disappointed Caitlin Clark was, which is honest. And Caitlin took the high road saying it was fine. It wasn't fine for Caitlin Clark, and she was not happy. And I don't blame her one bit. It was one of the worst, the worst Olympic team selection decision I've seen, and I've covered the Olympics since the 1984 LA Games. So,
Wow.
yeah, so it was as bad as it gets. And so you've got Dawn Staley on the committee, and Dawn Staley's brain, there's a reason that Caitlin had 10 turnovers that first game, May 14th of 2024. She never had 10 turnovers again. It's because she's being guarded and her team is not yet, the ball is slipping off. A couple of those, they went off people's fingertips. Iowa players might have caught them because they were prepared for it. The Fever weren't yet prepared. They'd only had a few practices. They get rushed right into the season. So by the third game, the New York game, all this is in the book. By the third game in New York, you've got, it's sold out. Billie Jean King, Michelle Wie, the golfer, Jason Sudeikis, so many others are
By the
there to
way,
see.
Billie Jean King is in the book. I'm going to make sure everybody listening to this know this. You also got Billie Jean King on the record talking about Clark as well.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, and how the behavior of Kennedy Carter, that was after
Excuse
the
me.
Kennedy Carter hit. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And about, right, just like, don't blow this. This is the moment. Treat her right. So, oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the voices, I'm so honored to have so many of these great voices, including the racial stuff with Harry Edwards. And when I say racial stuff, I mean the very significant issues of 74% Black League. But again, I touch on everything and move on. I will not bog you down. I will not bore you with anything. I'm not going to take you down rabbit holes. You're going to get everything because I had to write so quickly. I think that also made the book so much more readable, actually. But why on earth do you not see this? If you're the committee, these great basketball minds, I say this in the book, as you know, and I say you could see what was happening. And now, like Dawn Staley goes on TV on NBC, at the Olympics and says, yo, she's playing so much better now. Dawn Staley, you are a basketball mind. You didn't know what was going on? They just didn't want her on the team. And what an unbelievable sentence. And I'll say this as long as people ask me, or as long as I get a chance to talk about it. What an unbelievable sentence that is. That in 2024, USA Basketball's women's committee, the selection committee for the women's basketball team, made the decision, no, Caitlin Clark, no, we do not want you on our Olympic team. We do not want you representing the United States. Oh, how awful, how ridiculous, how insane, how stupid that is. And it looks worse today than it did then, and it's going to look worse. And hopefully Caitlin's, she'll have many Olympics. Well, she's been injured most of this year, folks. I certainly hope, knock on wood, a million times for Caitlin Clark's sake. Again, I'm not in cahoots with her. I'm not in business with her. She'll write her own book. It'll be amazing. That ain't this. This book is a journalistic,
Yes.
unauthorized, obviously, not ominous at all. She participated. But Caitlin Clark, who knows what, again, knock on wood for her. So the arrogance of that Olympic committee, I don't know if I've ever used that word before, but I will here with you, the arrogance of that committee to like, oh, she's got time, we don't want her. And of course, they give the going away present to Diana Taurasi. Name another time in the history of the Olympics you've just given a going away present to someone.
Yeah.
Just absolutely disastrous decision making. And then, of course, one of my favorite lines in the that I was able to write in the book, if I'll share with you, is that if you'll give me the that fun opportunity again, is that Caitlin Clark and Diana Taurasi both played the same number of minutes and scored the same number of points in the gold medal game, which was a 2-point win, a very close, very shaky 2-point win for the U.S. over France to win the gold medal. They both played the same number of minutes, same number of points. One of them, Diana Taurasi, was sitting on the bench in Paris. The other was 4,000 miles away in the United States. Congratulations, USA Basketball. Congratulations. That was so important to have Diana Taurasi. She didn't play 1 minute in this most important of games. So, yes, again, just stunning. Going back, the guarding of Caitlin Clark, the defense, the blitzing. And within a game or two, she was already handling it, playing great. The logo threes were starting she had a couple. But then that Saturday game, which was May 18th, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, in New York. And how this committee failed to see that. It's just stunning. As I said, I'll probably get more tidbits down the road, and I'll certainly put them on social media or in a follow-up because, yeah, 100%. It's something we need to stay on because it just was such ineptitude at the very, very top of one of the top national governing bodies in the United States.
It was fortunate. This would have probably, the Clark didn't score a lot of when they had the All-Star break. They had Team USA play the WNBA All-Stars, and the WNBA All-Stars beat our Olympic team, and that had a lot of people raising their eyebrows. And then also, I'm surprised. I don't think you were shocked by that. Clark and how she seems to have like the Kobe, MJ, Tiger competitive mindset. I'm sure she was wanting to send a message with that. Just how lucky do you think the league and the Olympic Committee were that they were able to pull out that win against France in the gold medal game? Because I don't think there would have been. I think the fallout if they had lost that game with Taurasi on the bench and Clark at home would have been pleasant for them.
Oh, well, it would have been a unmitigated PR disaster. Oh yeah. I mean, they're so lucky. And I'm obviously I'm a journalist. I covered the semifinal game. I was watching the game. I was going to the closing ceremony. So I was busy with a few other end of column, end of the games column. And we had the breaking news about the gymnastics, Jordan Childs having her medal taken away. So there's tons going on.
Yeah.
Which is another reason you put Caitlin Clark on the team and journalists left from everywhere in the world would have come running. But if she's not on the team, the U.S. team is just not as interesting to journalists. Sorry, folks. I wish it weren't the case. It's true. And there's 40 Super Bowls going on a day at the Olympics. You know what I mean?
Yes.
For Italy, they've got a race that is their Super Bowl. For Japan, they've got an event that is their Super Bowl. You've got U.S. reporters who are torn left, right, and center. You got to go cover track and field the final day. You got to go cover the marathon. You got to go cover whatever. There's just too much going on. You got to get ready to get in line for the closing ceremonies, which takes several hours to get in if you're a journalist covering it and the security. So but Caitlin Clark would have been like, oh, I got to go there. And for hundreds of journalists. And then they would have covered and shown the world Asia Wilson and shown the world Brianna Stewart in a way they had never been seen before. And so many of those other amazing, terrific, great players that deserve that attention. Brittany Griner, yes, very well known, of course, but well known because she got kidnapped by, and the terrible Vladimir Putin regime.
Yeah, that.
And caged. Brittany Griner wasn't, unfortunately, so sadly, wasn't known for basketball. She was known for that horrible imprisonment by the awful, awful Vladimir Putin and his terrible regime in Russia. Just absolutely abhorrent behavior by Russia to keep her like that. But that is for a tiny little bit of prescribed hashish that, of course, she shouldn't have had it in her luggage, and that was a mistake, but it was prescribed in the United States. Anyway, point being, but I covered Brittany Griner. I covered her at Final Fours. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was there covering it. I wish it had happened sooner. The notion, I think, BJ, that some people have that this is like, oh, yay, Caitlin, and that I'm personally like, I name another, and I'm saying this rhetorically, name another journalist, male or female, who's been around since the 90s covering the WNBA and women's basketball, who's still around.
Just not
There's a
many.
couple. There's a couple of us. There's a few on TV. Debbie Antonelli for sure, and but Lobo was playing in the 90s. Rebecca Lobo. But very few. So all these people who are like mad at me or want to attack me, or on whatever terms that I wasn't around. I heard that there's someone, I'll just say it, someone on TV who's going around saying, well, Christine Brennan hasn't been around, so I'm not reading her book.
That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, let's say, yeah. Oh, do the 90s not count? Do the first part of the 21st century not count? Oh, okay. Right. I mean, but this is that they want to keep the small things small.
Yeah.
I didn't say that in the book. I was tempted to. I'm going to say it more and more. I may write a column just on this whole experience because I've learned so much about the dislike of Caitlin Clark from women. Women's, we had a bar. We were going to do an event in LA at a bar called the Watch Me Sports Bar in LA, and they canceled. And we had an agreement, verbal. My publicist there in LA, all set, and a couple weeks before, I think, they canceled. And I called the owner. I said, why did you renege on your agreement with us? Well, it's just, recent events. And I said, well, the only recent event is we're number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list. What are you talking about? Obviously I'm being a little, they're flipped there, obviously. But I said, what happened? I want to know. And then she wouldn't say. And then something about her community, like, I guess, do they want to keep the bar free of Caitlin Clark? Books? I literally have no idea. So I asked her, I said, did you read the book? She said, no. So what is going on there?
I think it's a great
truly,
question, and it's that's a question I think we're all still trying to find out.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, I'm being encouraged to write something about this, and just the young women who seem so reluctant. Is the WNBA? I'm asking this. I do not know. Is the WNBA encouraging people to avoid the book, right? Or are some of the big, media partners, when you've got someone who is, it's a name you would know, I'm not going to say it, but saying, oh, Christine Brennan hasn't been around, so I'm not reading the book. So where's that coming from? Now, it's failed miserably, right?
Absolutely, it has.
The
Yeah.
book is, it's still selling fantastically, and New York Times, as I said, and I'm so honored, and so many people. I'm just so humbled and honored by that. And when I say it, it's not like I'm trying to be, arrogant about it. I'm just giving the facts that if they wanted to minimize the interest in the book, or if people were like trying to downplay it, like this bar in LA, this women's sports bar, which of course we would have only given great publicity to, right? I would have put it all over my social media. Few people do read that, and they turn that down. I mean, what is the dislike? And I'm again rhetorical. I'm just musing with you.
Yes.
I don't know if I really talked about this too much, but I think it's hopefully it's fascinating to people if they want to listen to this. If not, they're long gone already, so that's okay. But I never would presume anyone cares about anything anymore in our world. But if you are interested in this, why would you've got someone coming in who wants to bring more people to your bar, this new relatively new women's sports bar in LA, and instead you cancel, and you don't want to have people coming, and you don't want to have a book signing for a book on Caitlin Clark. It's like, and as I said, I tried very hard. I think I'll call her again and try one more time, certainly before I would write anything, because I want to give her a chance, totally a chance, over and over to give me a reason or talk about this and explain it. What is it about some of these women? Meanwhile, as fans are pouring in to see this woman, again, it's like keeping the small thing small, maybe. I've had people explain it. I think it makes some sense. Like when you love an indie band and it's your little thing, and then the rest of the world, it becomes bigger. The band gets bigger, and like you But why wouldn't you love that? As a journalist, you want to cover big things. You want to cover something that's growing that people care about, that you'll have more hits and clicks and you'll be able to reach more people. That's such a basic, right, in journalism. And yet there somehow seems to be this disconnect. So all of it's fascinating, all of it's interesting, and I'm on it, and I'm not going away, and I will continue to report on all of this and the again, how people want to just assume other players can be Caitlin Clark. They're so completely out of it in terms of the facts and information that is just basic stuff that is not obviously being given to them by at least some media members. I don't know why, but let's hope that they pick up their game, get on their game, and start doing a better job covering the magnitude of the Caitlin Clark phenomenon.
Yeah. This will be my last question, Christine. You've been extremely generous with your time. Thank you very much. You were involved in some controversies, and this is listed in the book along as well as you're going through Caitlin's season. You're also kind of looping in the history of what led us to getting Caitlin, and the forerunners before her and different players and things like that. And you look through her season game by game, and but you ran into some issues along the way. The most prominent was Dejanay Carrington. There was the moment in the playoffs where she was swiping hands, trying to get hands in, I guess, Clark's away so she couldn't, just playing defense. She got her in the eye with a nail. It not being a big deal, but you asked her about it because that's your job to ask about it. Things kind of got rough from there. A teammate came over and was basically uh, accosting you over it. There was also an incident that happened with you and two other Fever writers when you were in the, I guess you were in the in a back area eating food or lunch or something, and they overheard you guys talking about the Fever lineup. This stuff just gets to me is like if I'm Carrington and I'm involved in something like that where people don't know what my intention was and it's spreading all over social media, I would welcome the opportunity for somebody to ask me, "Hey, did you mean to do that on purpose?" And she said no. She didn't have that. She didn't mean to do it on purpose. She wasn't trying to hurt her. She was just playing good defense. I thought she gave a good answer.
Hmm.
And but it's like players, they just don't have the media literacy, or maybe it's because they're just not getting covered enough up until they get to this point in the pros because of the things we've seen that's happened with journalism. That they're not getting the questions like this until now. Um, just
Right.
I know it had to be very frustrating for you because no journalist, no writer wants to become the focus of their own story, but in a way that is part of the story because it just goes to how unprepared the league was, and it also gets to just how little players and coaches really answer questions anymore. It's really become a controlled environment. What do you think the league should do with about these kind of things, and what do you think sports should do? Because I know in Cincinnati, Joe Burrow's never done a local interview with any local media one on one. I think this first one-on-one interview here was when the Kelsey brothers had a podcast here at UC, which is where they went to school at. But
Right.
when I read that in the book, it just got to me. This is a greater problem here, where media and journalists and sports writers don't have access to these players, and they also that doesn't. I mean, the players aren't used to communicating with the media too.
No, that's for sure. I mean, it's been happening over the length of my career. I remember when Tiger Woods debuted his website, and he could go right to the website and say whatever he wanted to say. And in the past, of course, you needed the journalists. You needed to gather reporters. You
Hmm.
needed to say something so you could be, get the word out. And so, obviously now. And then, of course, that was just the website. Now, social media, you just go to your social media. So that is a phenomenon that's not going to change. And I frankly don't blame blame athletes and their agents, their representatives, their PR people, team PR people. I don't blame them for using that forum because then they can just put out the quotes as they want to. I've been misquoted. I've been misquoted a lot on book tours, not just this one and other ones. So I know how frustrating it can be. Journalists, young and old, you got to tape everything and you got to get the quote exactly right. And you need to give the context of the quote. And we can't be messing things up. So that's number one. So certainly over the years, there has been that. there have been mistakes or issues with journalists, as much as I'm 100% for journalism. And you've got to get it right. And so now athletes and coaches and teams and everyone can just go to social media, put it out there, and then you just quote the quote, and you have to get it accurate because it's out there already. There's a timestamp, right? So, and I love social media because I can break news, and other newspapers can't say, "Oh, we broke it first." Well, no, because there's the timestamp of my tweet, my post on X or whatever. If I do threads as well and others. So that's all changed everything. It changed it for us, changed it for athletes, teams, everyone. So that's just a fact, and we're not going back. So, and there's no downside for a Joe Burrow, right? There's no, I mean, the journalists who cover the Bengals can all go, all the reporters, bloggers, everyone that's credentialed. Oh, this is terrible. Well, okay, go ahead, just keep saying it's terrible. These are the facts, and you need to deal with it. Now, this is when you have assistant coaches who are sources. This is when you have agents who are sources. You got to work it, and you can break news, and you can find out things, and then you can go to Burrow's people and say, hey, I just heard that you might have tweaked your ankle again or whatever, and you can then, there's many ways to break news. You don't put it out there without talking to them. Like, I have no idea. You'd asked about Caitlin Clark and how disheartening this is. I've talked to some people within the Fever. I've heard a few things, but I would never report it because it's an athlete's injury. And an injury, you need to talk. You get the quote directly from the athlete, the coach, the doctor, family member, maybe. But otherwise, you do not speculate because you have no idea. We need to know what we know. We need to know what we don't know. Journalism 101. And you don't report stuff you don't know. And that's what on her game. Everything in that book is buttoned down, everything, double, triple, quadruple checked. If I didn't know it, if I couldn't be sure of it, it's not in the book. I'm not going to waste your time as a reader. I'm not going to give you bad information. Book's been out 7 weeks as of today or tomorrow. So, and not one peep. Not one complaint, not one person complaining. I feel it's great about that, and probably greater about that than I do about the sales and the bestseller status of this book, because that means I did my job as a journalist. Not one person saying they were misquoted, there's something wrong, nothing. There is a typo, a missing W at one point where it should say WNBA, which has been fixed. So, I'll take that, writing it in 4 months. That's just a mistake that got through the system, but that's a typo. So what I'm saying is I'm just so happy about that, but you got to get things right. But now the WNBA, to this particular Dejanay Carrington situation, the players, the league, as great Harry Edwards, who I quote, he's the man behind the Black Power salute at the 1968 Mexico City Olympics. Harry Edwards blurbed the book with Bob Costas and Leslie Visser and Jackie McMullen, my college classmate Mike Wilbon. But he's also in the book. And he says, Harry Edwards says, the WNBA failed its players. And that quote is as important a quote as any quote in the book. Although the Caitlin Clark quotes are great and they're magic, and the logo threes jumping off the page. Of course, you're going to get a lot of fun sports and a lot of Caitlin Clark magic in this book for sure. It's not going to just, all that we're talking about is is quick and it's there and then moves on. But yeah, I mean, the players have no idea what journalism is. Dejanay Carrington, as you know, BJ, should be thrilled. You kind of alluded to this. Should be thrilled to get this question. She's getting pummeled on social media over those couple days, about 48 hours, not quite at that point. Millions and millions of tweets and posts about how awful she is. She tried to injure Caitlin Clark. You have to ask the question, how on earth did every other journalist in that scrum, probably 15, 20 of us around her, maybe 50, whatever, TV cameras, others, producers, radio, everyone. How was I the only one to ask the question? Everyone should be asking that question. That is the only question you ask at that point. That is the news story that is dominating the headlines. PJ, how was I the only person to even?
That was another thing I was going to ask was like, why is it you have all the supposed people that have been here for the entire time, like the critics like to refer to, but like, how does that not get asked by somebody who was a beat writer or somebody who's, or fall into WNBA, like, or just anywhere, working for one of their own websites or blogs that comes in? That was the only question to ask at that point. That was the biggest story coming out of the playoffs at that point.
It's the only one. It's the only one. Utter failure of those journalists. Again, some of whom I have mentored or helped. I talk to. I like them. It makes me sad to say these words, but I'm going to say them because this is the truth, and the truth is the truth. I mean, it's just ridiculous. We're not sugarcoating. We're adults here, and people need to deal with it. And so that. And then of course you ask a specific question. And I say this all in the book. There's the epilogue. I decoupled it from the Caitlin Clark magic. It's near the end, and you get that whole. And I had to tell the story because if I hadn't put it in the book, I would have been criticized for not putting it in the book. So it's
Absolutely.
in the book, right? And I tell the truth, the whole story. Of course, I tell the truth everywhere, but the whole story, which people got wrong. There's a podcaster who I've helped for years, who I've been on her radio shows for years, just lying, making stuff up. Now I'm going to use her name because it doesn't even matter. Just, people like just wild theories, nonsense. I called this particular person. I said, you've got about, I don't know, 3 or 4 things wrong in one tweet. Oh, okay, I'll just say that then. In another tweet, I said, no, you will not do that. And I finally had to tweet out how wrong this was. Well, now that person knows how wrong that she was because it's all there. I did not protest to the league. The league called me. They were so concerned. They said my questions were totally correct, right, proper. I mean, it's a complete train wreck going on because these players have never, ever understood, or at least some of them have not understood what real questions are. Caitlin Clark understands, takes every single one, never flinches, never gets mad, never, ever. But she's clearly been trained, and also super smart, and also very, very mature, and understands all of it. So the combination, Caitlin's ready for this. Dejanay wasn't. But to get mad, you've just done yourself a service by answering it, hitting it out of the park, and you're quieting your millions of, or thousands, whatever, of critics who are putting out millions of tweets. And then the follow-up, of course, because that was out there too, videos of she and Marina Mabrey laughing. It looked like 3 to the dome, Carmelo Anthony's gesture, but you don't know until you ask. You ask questions. I've asked hundreds and hundreds of tougher questions, most of male athletes. Was the Players Association saying that women cannot handle the same questions as male athletes? Is that what they were saying there? Is that the message they want to send to all these girls in 22 jerseys and other WNBA jerseys in 2024, 2025? Is that the message? Be softer on women? Megan Rapinoe, who I've covered for years, who I know, we did an event together for Google where we were on stage together. I was asking her questions, moderating it. We're friendly. Megan Rapinoe said my questions felt racist to her. I would make the case it would be racist to not ask an athlete a question that you would ask a male athlete. That somehow a woman, in this case a black woman, would need to be coddled. Is that what they're saying? Is that what they want? Is that the message? That is a devastating, devastating message to be sending to the millions of girls and women playing sports in this country, to the men, the dads, the grandfathers, the guys who are now totally into the WNBA. I mean, is that the players union? And I've talked to them, tried many times to have them speak to me. And Terry Jackson, I have her cell number, and she had texts and phone calls, and wanted her, give her every chance to explain why she did what she did, and how, of course, it failed miserably, totally backfired. I had credentials. I was at the game 1 of the playoffs, at October game that Kathy Engelbert talked for 27 minutes without mentioning Caitlin Clark's name when she did the State of the League. So I was there, and I was credentialed for the WNBA All-Star game as well. So a complete failure and just utter embarrassment. Again, you asked me earlier, it makes me sad for them, but I'm full speed ahead as a journalist. And these are stories that you cover because if you you report the news. And if it does expose some things that need to be changed, and I would make the case these things probably need to be changed, and they need to kind of get on their game and figure things out and get with the plan. This is the moment. This is the moment for the WNBA. This is it. What are you going to do?
Absolutely.
Are you going to squander it? And so anyway, my reporting, of course, remains the same always. Yeah. But yes, that was just a PR nightmare for the Players Association, for the players, and such a missed opportunity to show people that they did want the same questions that male athletes get.
The book is On Her Game. It's about the stunning last senior season in college for Caitlin Clark, all the way through her rookie season by Christine Brennan, who is a sports columnist for the USA Today, and one of my favorite reads. And if you haven't been able to tell through this podcast, who I'm a huge fan of, but thanks for your time. You've been fantastic, and just I want to tell everybody out there this is a must-read book if you're a sports fan. It's a fast read. I got through it in a couple days. You will learn so much, and it is fun rereading just Caitlin's, moments through the last, or, through the NCAA tournament all the way through the her rookie season, and just what a whirlwind of a year for her and for you. And thanks for being on. It's been amazing.
Oh, DJ, hey, it was great. Sorry, I went on, but the stories are just so darn fascinating, and people care so much about Caitlin Clark and these issues, and I am honored to do my best to bring them to people and to be as honest and true. And I'm not stopping. I mean, there's gonna the hardcover's out now. By the way, it's on like an incredible sale on Amazon. They do that with some popular books. So this is the time for holiday gifts or whatever. And I do book plates for people. Just get in touch at my website, and I'll send those to anyone. I'm doing a lot of that right now. I'll put that out again on social media. But also there'll be a paperback in May that will deal with all kinds of stuff from season 2. So, but that's a few months away. So thank you
Oh,
so much, and
I
just
can't
great to
wait for
talk to
that one
you.
now.
Yeah. Well, we'll do this again, and
All
we'll talk
right.
for another hour and a half.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm all for it. All right.
Thanks, DJ. Really appreciate you
Thank
and
you
all your
very
great
much.
work.
Thank you very much.